Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. In this latest Moon Lambo hot gem, I'm most looking forward to share with you perspective from the head of research at a very well-known investment firm. This particular individual is very data-driven and I think just has some really great analytical skills when it comes to figuring out what's happening on a macro scale and what that means specifically for the world of crypto. You're gonna like this though. There are lots of reasons to believe that the second quarter of this year is when the market's finally going to be popping. And that's for a number of reasons, including global liquidity, which is the reason that we see 4-year cycles. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. And there's also this headline, which I thought I'd mention, especially on a day like this where price is a bit more down and people are feeling gloomy. Headline is, Analyst Forecasts 600% XRP price rally as Ripple defends critical $2 support. I just got to know CoinGape. That's where this article comes from. CoinGape, how the hell is it 2025 and you are conflating XRP and Ripple? One is a decentralized cryptocurrency. One is a company in California. What gives? It's just, you get a pass if you're saying this and it's the year like 2017. Okay. People are still learning. It's fine. It's 2025, bitch. What are you doing? Anyway, though, I just thought I'd highlight this. And I'm not going to read the article. I just thought I'd point out here that, the analysts that have been calling for these higher price movements, still, despite what we've seen in recent days, they still firmly believe, yeah, we're not only going to hit a new all-time high, we're entering price discovery. And I'm not familiar with this particular analyst. This is the one that they were cited in the article here. Goes by the name Crypto Elites. I think I've seen the name before. But pretty big following, 254,100 followers. And at the time this was posted, XRP is probably around $2.20, something like that. And he simply said, XRP heading to $15 very soon. I shared it with you when XRP was at 50 cents, and we're now up 600%. And he said the target remains $15. So just wanted to point out that short-term volatility doesn't mean, when it's to the downside, doesn't mean that anything has structurally broken. So it may feel like it's wild to you, because just the other day, how was XRP? Over $2.50 or somewhere around there? And then it drops down to $2.06 this morning. Well, that must feel like it could be the end of the world. It's so topsy-turvy, the whole thing's going to fall over. Well, no, you're actually just within a range. And then, the people who understand that don't have as much trouble with, in terms of emotionally managing this volatility. But if you don't understand that, it feels like you don't even know why it's happening, and then the lack of knowledge makes you freak out. And I think like a lot of time, that's one of the most harmful things, seeing price action happening and not understanding why. But the truth of the matter is, it's not that the price fluctuations in any given moment is some sort of indication of the long-term viability of XRP. It's just people like mosh pitting, if you will, bouncing off one another in the financial world, buying and selling frantically with no rhyme or reason to it, effectively. Like that's what the short-term stuff is here. But that doesn't indicate anything. It just doesn't. And so ultimately, number go up here. There's also this, and I shared this in a post this morning, but it's absolutely directly related to what I want to focus on for the rest of this video. So I want to highlight this to make sure as many people as possible see this. As far as I'm concerned, it's a matter-of-fact statement that these 4-year crypto cycles we've seen for the entire existence of crypto, 16 years now, it's not because of the Bitcoin halving. That doesn't make sense. It's because of global liquidity. That pairs up pretty damn well. In fact, so here's a post from Raoul Pal. He shared this with his 1.1 million followers. He's the founder and CEO of Global Macro Investor and Real Vision. And former Goldman Sachs executive, happens to own some XRP. And he just noted here, that black line here, it's the global M2, so that's some of the most liquid money on the entire planet, with a 10-week lead over the pink line, which is the price of Bitcoin, and you can see that this correlates. And so as global liquidity increases, what happens? Well, people allocate funds. So if liquidity is high, people need to put funds somewhere. A certain amount will go into the stock market, it'll go into Bitcoin and the rest of crypto. That's the point. So if you see global liquidity increasing, whatever the underlying reasons are, that's typically pretty damn good for people in crypto, for people that are invested in risk-on assets. That's the point. And Julian Biddle, who is the head of macro research at GMI, Sharp dude. This is a guy I was referencing at the outset of the video. He agrees with the concept. His humble opinion is that it makes more sense. It correlates a little bit more closely if you have a 10-week lead time, or rather a 12-week lead time instead of 10. But we're splitting hairs at this point. Either way, whether you think it's 10 weeks, 11 weeks, 12 weeks, it doesn't matter. There's a clear correlation. Global liquidity is increasing, so that alone is a good reason to be very optimistic here. And he stated that April marks the bottom of the white line here, for those who look at the screen, and then we start moving higher again. And so I shared, that's what I shared in a video this morning. But let's expand a little bit further, because there are reasons to be very optimistic that the best is yet ahead for XRP, because the whole cycle moves in tandem. So this idea of XRP still getting into double digits, despite the most recent price suppression, just because of regular volatility, like, it's still coming here, folks. So if you want some reasons to be optimistic, well, Julian Biddle certainly has you covered here. All right, and so he wrote the following: time for a sentiment check. Number one, back in early March, the American Association of Individual Investors, AAII, survey showed over 60% of investors were bearish. That's only happened 5 other times since the survey began in 1987. Okay, number 2, the Conference Board's March survey showed a similar spike in bearish sentiment. 44.5% of consumers expect stock prices to decline over the next year. That's the highest since July 2022, and before that, October 2011. That's interesting, folks. And I'll just pause to note here. A lot of times what the masses think is most likely to happen is just not what happens. When everybody's expecting it, the market just does the opposite so frequently. But anyway, number 3, the Q1 Alliance Life study, published this week, found that 51% of Americans believe another big market crash is on the horizon, end quote. Let me just pause and note. For those of you that were here in 2022, do you remember the sentiment and what people were screaming? As FTX had collapsed, there were so many analysts out there screaming, look, stock market, everything, we're going to go into this multi-year recession, just in this bear market. And what we actually saw was that as they were screaming that was the bottom of the market for crypto. That's where Bitcoin actually bottomed out. And you know what's happened since then, much higher than, like November and December of 2022. People get stuff wrong all the damn time. The crowd gets things wrong. And so right here, number 4, the March B of A Fund Manager Survey reported the largest drop in U.S. equity allocation on record. Yes, on record. Bottom line, if you don't think we're heading into a 2008-style entrenched recession, then it's time to back the truck up and buy. My 2 cents? Despite the Q1 wobble, driven entirely by Q4's tightening in financial conditions and fueled by speculation that tariffs, much like in Q4 2016, ahead of Trump's first year in office, would be inflationary, markets are already reversing that concern, as evidenced by the recent decline in the dollar, bond yields, and U.S. one-year inflation break-even rates. That said, changes in financial conditions tend to work with a 10 to 12-week lead time, which is why risk assets are still under pressure. And so, folks, risk assets, that's crypto, that's stock market, that's your XRP, still under pressure. And we've seen that, haven't we? Markets are spooked. And the tariff stuff, that obviously was a contributing factor. There's no getting around that. Whatever you think about that from a political perspective, I don't care. I'm just saying the fact that was happening, it resulted in uncertainty in markets. And that's something that investment markets just don't like. Stock market, crypto markets, yeah, people in risk on assets, not big fans of that. And so they'll keep funds aside, perhaps because, they'll sell, keep funds aside until there is more certainty when they feel more comfortable. Like, that's just how a lot of humans behave. And so he says, the good news, I expect Q2 to be a markedly different environment, driven by a rebound in U.S. economic surprises and fresh liquidity coming back into markets. Folks, did you hear that? That's a key takeaway. Fresh liquidity coming back into markets. It says, additionally, markets have already priced in a ton of uncertainty. While we may still get some near-term chop or a final dip lower into the April 2nd tariff announcement, the path of least resistance after that feels higher. April should be the month for a turn. That's my contrarian take on things anyway. Let's see how it plays out. Yeah, well, I'm glad that he's got the contrarian take, because whatever the masses think tends to be wrong. And so there you go. Liquidity increasing. We know there's a lag time. Other macro environment factors just ripe for something like this to occur. It just makes sense, and nobody knows for sure. Like something disastrous that could go wrong. Who knows? There's a black swan event, and then this all falls apart. But when we're talking about what might happen in the market, nobody knows for sure. And anybody that won't admit that, they're just lying to you, or they got some just unbelievably large ego, and they're not like sufficiently living in the realm of reality. But we're talking about probability of outcome, and I don't see how it makes sense to believe that what's most probable is that Q2 is going to be a complete disaster. While acknowledging, like, I don't know, nobody knows. But if you're talking about what's most probable, yeah, there's a lot of reason to be very optimistic about what's coming, and XRP is the most prime large cap coin in all of crypto. So if this is coming to pass, buckle up, because XRP is going to melt some goddamn faces. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying, man. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.